This pre-cal lesson is about parametric equations. The reason we want to do this is for most of your math life we've talked about rectangular coordinates, meaning that we're talking in terms of x and y being the main variables. Parametric is used in physics and other sciences where time is a major factor, and so you want to put x and y in terms of t. So there are times when we need three variables. That's where this really comes into play. That's things like objects in motion and things starting to be in 3D, which is really important in Calculus 3. So if you're long-term looking at what this might help you with, those are the main things. The parameter is the third variable. So that's called your parameter. And then we've got a parametric equation, which is where you write x and y in terms of t. Okay, let's look at some examples. Number one, I want you to sketch the curve and solve for the rectangular coordinates. Here's what you're going to start with. X equals t squared minus 4, and y equals t divided by 2. Okay, the first thing I want to do is solve for t in each equation. So if we're going to write steps, let's write those over here. Number one, solve for t in both x and y. So for x, if I'm going to solve for t, I'm going to start here. X equals t squared minus 4. Add 4 to both sides. I have x plus 4 equals t squared. Take the square root of both sides, and t equals plus or minus the square root of x plus 4. That's my first step right there, is to solve for that one. Also, if I want to get on the y, if I want to get y solved, I'm going to plug this in where I see the t here. So now y equals, we're going to just solve for t and x. And step 2, plug in for y. So I'm going to plug in plus or minus the square root of x plus 4, all divided by 2. And that's going to be my equation. To get my graph, I'm going to pick some points. I'm going to make a table. So pick points and do table. And when I say do a table, I mean do a t, an x, and a y. If I pick some variables for t, like -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, that's what I've kind of always had for my main ones when I've always started with x. And then I'm going to plug those into the x equation and to the y equation. This is to get the graph part, so this is different than the original. If I wanted to graph it using the calculator, I would just plug this in because now I have what it would look like. But to do that using my table, I'm going to do -2 plugged in for t for x. -2 squared is positive 4, minus 4 is 0. -1 squared is 1, minus 4 is -3. 0 squared minus 4 is -4. 1 squared minus 4 is -3. And 2 squared minus 4 is 0. That's coming from right here if I plug in each one of those values of t for x. And then separately I do that with y. So -2 over 2 is -1. -1 over 2 is -1/2. 0 over 2 is 0. 1 over 2 is 1/2. And 2 over 2 is 1. Now, when I go to graph this, I'm going to do this the traditional way using an x and y axis. I'm going to do at 0, it's -1. At -3, I've got to make sure that's on there first. I'm at -1/2. At -4, 0. At -3, 1/2. And at 0, 1. And you should be able to see that this is a curve facing in this direction. Notice that when I did my graph, I eliminated my parameter t and just used my x and y part to graph. So probably step 5, use x and y to graph. Okay, let's look at one more example of this. And example 2, I just want you to graph. So if x is equal to t and y is equal to -2t, I want to go ahead and find my equation. So x is already solved for, so y equals -2x, right? If I make my chart, my t, my x, and my y to get rid of t, I'm going to start with those first 5 values we've kind of always started with. If I plug them in, the x values are exactly the same since t is equal to x. And for my y values, I'm going to multiply by -2. So that'd be 4, 2, 0, -2, and -4. And if I graph that, I would get -2, 4, -1, 2, 0, 0, 1, -2, and 2, -4. And this is this straight line with slope -2. And that should make sense to you and seem very familiar. So this is pretty easy and pretty straightforward. Hope you get that. Assignment number 11 is page 776. It's numbers 3 to 10. Good luck, and let me know if you have questions.